I stood there, broken champagne glass at my feet, as the city's most prestigious restaurant owner pointed at the door and screamed for security. She had no idea that the quiet young man sitting in the corner booth watching everything unfold wasn't just my son. He was the landlord who owned the entire building her restaurant operated in. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Elena Winters, and I'm a 52-year-old widow who spent most of my life working as a night shift nurse at a community clinic in the forgotten part of Riverside Heights. If someone had told me 5 years ago that my shy, introverted son would become one of the city's most successful real estate developers before his 30th birthday, I would have checked them for a head injury. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. My son, Trevor, was always different from other kids. While his classmates dreamed of becoming athletes or entertainers, Trevor spent his time studying architecture magazines and drawing building designs on napkins. He'd walk through the city taking photos of old buildings, imagining how they could be transformed. I remember finding notebooks filled with his calculations about property values and renovation costs when he was just 15. Most mothers would worry about finding hidden cigarettes or bad report cards. I found spreadsheets about commercial real estate investments. After his father passed away from cancer when Trevor was 17, something changed in him. He became even quieter, more focused. He worked 3 jobs while attending community college, saving every penny he could. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to find him still awake, studying for his business classes or analyzing property listings online. He lived on instant noodles and wore the same 3 shirts for years, putting every dollar toward his dream. What I didn't know was that Trevor had been secretly building something extraordinary, using a small inheritance from his grandmother that I thought he'd saved for graduate school. He'd purchased his first property, a run-down warehouse in the industrial district. He renovated it himself, learning plumbing and electrical work from YouTube videos, and flipped it for triple what he paid. That profit went into the next property, then the next. Within 3 years, he'd built a portfolio worth millions, all while still living in his childhood bedroom and driving a 15-year-old Honda. The revelation came on my 50th birthday when Trevor handed me a set of keys. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said in that quiet way of his. "You don't have to work night shifts anymore." The keys were to a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in the safest part of the city, fully paid for, in my name. When I demanded an explanation, he finally showed me everything: the properties, the companies, the entire empire he'd built, while I thought he was just another struggling young adult. But here's the thing about Trevor. Success never changed his humble nature. He still wore simple clothes from discount stores, still drove that old Honda, and still preferred reading in quiet cafes to attending flashy business events. He managed his properties through a company called Cornerstone Holdings, and almost no one knew that the T. Winters listed as CEO was the same quiet young man who often sat alone in coffee shops with his laptop. He insisted I keep working if it made me happy, but only because I wanted to, not because I needed to. So I switched to part-time day shifts, spending my free time volunteering at a literacy center and trying new restaurants around the city. Which brings me to that Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The invitation had come from my reading group, 6 women who met every week to discuss books and life over coffee. Judith, our self-appointed social coordinator, had been raving about this new restaurant called the Golden Terrace for months. It had supposedly been featured in every major food magazine, with a 3-month waiting list for reservations. But Judith's daughter worked in public relations and had somehow secured us a table for lunch. "You have to come, Elena," Judith had insisted. "It's supposed to be absolutely magnificent." The owner, Veronica Ashford, is apparently some kind of culinary genius. She trained in Paris and only sources ingredients from exclusive suppliers. The cheapest appetizer is $60, but we'll split everything. I hesitated at first. Fancy restaurants weren't really my scene. Growing up poor and working in healthcare for decades had given me simple tastes. I was more comfortable in family diners, where the coffee was strong and the pie was homemade. But the other women seemed so excited, and I didn't want to be the one who ruined their plans. The morning of the lunch, I stood in my closet feeling completely out of my depth. The nicest thing I owned was a navy blue dress I'd bought for a colleague's retirement party 2 years ago. It was clean, respectable, and made me feel confident. But I had a sinking feeling it wouldn't measure up to wherever we were going. Trevor was having breakfast when I came out of my room. He looked up from his laptop, probably reviewing property reports, and smiled. "You look nice, Mom. Special occasion?" "The reading group is trying that new fancy restaurant, the Golden Terrace," I said, adjusting my simple pearl necklace, a 25th anniversary gift from my late husband. Trevor's expression shifted slightly, just for a moment. "The Golden Terrace? On Fifth Avenue? That's the one. Judith's been dying to go." Way too fancy for me. But I don't want to disappoint the group. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "If you have any problems, call me. I'll be working from the coffee shop around the corner today." I laughed and kissed his forehead. "I think I can handle lunch, sweetheart. But thank you. If only I'd known what was waiting for me." The Golden Terrace occupied the ground floor of one of those beautiful pre-war buildings that made our city famous. The facade was all marble and brass, with doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Through the tall windows, I could see crystal chandeliers and orchid arrangements that looked like art installations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My reading group was already gathered outside when I arrived. Judith wore a designer suit that screamed money, while Patricia and Nancy had clearly gotten their hair done for the occasion. I suddenly felt like a sparrow among peacocks, but reminded myself that we were all just here to have lunch and enjoy each other's company. The interior was even more intimidating than I'd imagined. Every surface seemed to gleam, from the polished marble floors to the gold-leafed ceiling. Servers glided between tables like dancers, carrying plates that looked more like museum pieces than food. The other diners were clearly from a different world than mine, women dripping in diamonds, men in suits that probably cost more than my car, everyone speaking in hushed tones like they were in a cathedral. We were seated at a table near the kitchen, which Judith complained about, but I actually preferred. At least here we were partially hidden from the main dining room's intimidating elegance. The menu was entirely in French with no prices listed, never a good sign for someone used to checking the right side of the menu first. "Ladies, we must try the foie gras," Judith announced. "And the oyster collection. And definitely the truffle risotto." I quietly calculated my share and tried not to wince. One lunch would cost what I usually spent on groceries for a month. But I smiled and nodded, determined not to be the wet blanket. That's when I first noticed her watching us. Veronica Ashford was exactly what you'd expect from someone who owned a place like this. Tall and impossibly thin, with cheekbones that could cut glass and platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a white chef's coat that somehow looked like haute couture, and moved through her restaurant like a queen surveying her kingdom. But it was her eyes that made me uncomfortable, cold and calculating, scanning her domain for anything that didn't meet her standards. And apparently, I didn't meet those standards. I caught her staring at our table several times, her perfectly shaped eyebrows pulling together in a frown. At first, I thought maybe she was concerned about the service or the food, but then I realized her gaze kept landing specifically on me. "Is it just me?" whispered Patricia. "Or does the owner keep looking over here?" "She's probably just making sure everything's perfect," Judith said, though she looked pleased by the attention. These high-end places are very particular about their image. But I knew that look. I'd seen it before in boutiques where salespeople followed me around like I might steal something. In fancy hotels where doormen hesitated before opening the door. It was the look that said, "You don't belong here." I tried to ignore it and focus on the conversation. We were discussing our latest book, a mystery novel set in Venice, when our appetizers arrived. The portions were so small, I almost laughed. 3 oysters the size of quarters, a tablespoon of foie gras, and what looked like 4 grains of risotto arranged artfully on a plate that could have held a Thanksgiving turkey. Exquisite. Judith breathed, taking a photo for her Instagram. I had to admit, despite the ridiculous portions, the food was incredible. Flavors I'd never experienced before, combinations that shouldn't work but did. I was starting to relax and enjoy myself when Veronica Ashford herself approached our table. "Ladies?" she said, her voice smooth as silk but cold as winter. "I hope everything is to your satisfaction." Judith practically glowed. "Oh, Miss Ashford, everything is absolutely divine. We're so honored to be here." Veronica's smile was perfect and completely fake, like something painted on a mannequin. "How wonderful! And how did you hear about us, if you don't mind my asking?" "My daughter works for Pemberton PR," Judith said proudly. "She made the reservation for us. We're celebrating our book club's 5th anniversary." "How quaint," Veronica said, and somehow made the word sound like an insult. Her eyes swept over our table, lingering on my simple dress and modest jewelry. "We do pride ourselves on maintaining a certain atmosphere here at the Golden Terrace. I'm sure you understand." There was something in her tone that made everyone at the table shift uncomfortably. The warm, celebratory mood suddenly felt fragile. "Well," Veronica continued, her gaze now fixed directly on me, "I should check on the kitchen. Enjoy your meal." But she didn't leave. Instead, she walked to the host stand and began what was clearly an intense conversation with the maitre d', both of them glancing repeatedly at our table. At me. "What was that about?" Nancy whispered. "I'm sure it's nothing," Judith said, but she looked uncertain. The main courses arrived, beautifully presented portions that wouldn't satisfy a toddler, accompanied by sauces drizzled in patterns that belonged in an art gallery. I was halfway through my herb-crusted salmon when I became aware of a presence beside me. Veronica stood there, and this time she wasn't even pretending to smile. "Excuse me," she said, speaking directly to me while ignoring the rest of the table. "Might I have a word?" "Of course," I said, confused but trying to be polite. "I'm curious about something," she continued, her voice carrying now so that nearby tables could hear. "This establishment has a very strict dress code. We make this quite clear when reservations are confirmed. Yet, here you are." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "Your outfit," she interrupted, gesturing dismissively at my navy dress, "is completely inappropriate for the Golden Terrace. This isn't some chain restaurant where people can just walk in wearing whatever they pulled from the back of their closet." The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in that beautiful, terrifying room was suddenly on me. "Veronica," Judith started, "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Veronica said sharply. "We have standards here, a reputation to maintain. We cater to a certain caliber of clientele." She looked me up and down like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. And frankly, some people simply don't have the refinement to appreciate what we offer. I wanted to disappear, wanted to melt into the floor and cease to exist. But something, maybe it was years of dealing with difficult patients, maybe it was my late husband's voice in my head telling me to stand tall, made me meet her gaze. "I apologize if my appearance offends you," I said quietly. "We're just here to enjoy lunch." "Are you?" Veronica's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're here to drag down the ambiance we've worked so hard to create. Look around you." She gestured to the other diners, all watching our humiliation like it was dinner theater. "Do you see anyone else dressed like they're going to a PTA meeting?" Several people laughed. Actually laughed. I saw phones being pulled out, no doubt recording this moment for social media. My humiliation would probably be viral by dinner. "That's enough," Patricia said, finding her courage. "Elena is our friend, and your friend," Veronica interrupted, "should have known better than to come to an establishment like this dressed like that." She practically spit the last word. "The Golden Terrace has a 3-month waiting list. Do you know why? Because we're exclusive. Because we maintain standards. Because we don't let just anyone walk in off the street." She turned to the maitre d' who had appeared beside her. "Please prepare their check immediately. They'll be leaving." "Wait," Nancy said. "You're kicking us out?" "I'm protecting my restaurant's reputation," Veronica said coldly. Then, looking directly at me again, she added, "Some people need to learn to stay where they belong. There are plenty of family restaurants with laminated menus and free refills. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable there." The cruelty was so casual, so practiced. This wasn't the first time she'd done something like this. I could see it in the way her staff didn't even look surprised, just uncomfortable. That's when I noticed him. Trevor was sitting in a corner booth I hadn't seen when we came in, partially hidden behind one of those enormous orchid arrangements. He must have come here after I left, probably to keep an eye on me, knowing how nervous I'd been. He was watching everything unfold, his laptop closed in front of him, his hands pressed flat against the table. I knew that look. It was the same expression he'd had when kids teased him in school for his secondhand clothes, when his father's boss had refused to give us time off for the funeral, when the world had been cruel and he'd been powerless to stop it. Except he wasn't powerless anymore. The maitre d' approached with our check on a silver tray, his face a mask of professional discomfort. I could see he didn't enjoy being part of this public execution, but he wasn't going to risk his job by speaking up. The total was astronomical, nearly $800 for our unfinished meal. "We'll need you to settle this immediately and leave," Veronica announced loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "And please understand, you're no longer welcome at the Golden Terrace. Any of you." She looked at my friends, then back at me. Especially not her. I reached for my purse with shaking hands, trying to calculate my share, when Judith spoke up. "This is ridiculous. We're paying customers. You can't just—" "I can and I will." Veronica cut her off. "This is my establishment. I decide who dines here. And people who don't understand the basic principles of appropriate presentation have no business walking through those doors." That's when something extraordinary happened. A woman at a nearby table, someone I'd never seen before, stood up. She was elderly, probably in her 70s, wearing pearls and an elegant black dress. "Excuse me," she said in a voice that carried surprising authority. "I've been dining here since you opened, Miss Ashford, and I have to say, this display is beneath the standards you claim to uphold." Veronica turned, clearly shocked that anyone would challenge her in her own restaurant. "Mrs. Pemberton, I appreciate your patronage, but what I see," Mrs. Pemberton continued, "is a woman enjoying lunch with friends, being publicly humiliated because her dress doesn't meet some arbitrary standard that, frankly, I don't recall being mentioned when I made my reservation either." A murmur went through the restaurant. Other diners were starting to look uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. The phones that had been recording were slowly being lowered. "The situation is handled," Veronica said coldly, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Now, if you'll excuse me." "Mom." The single word cut through the tension like a knife. Trevor had stood up from his corner booth and was walking toward us with that quiet, measured pace I knew so well. He looked different somehow. Not in his clothes, which were typically understated, but in his bearing. There was something about the way he moved through that space that commanded attention. "Trevor, honey, it's fine," I said quickly, not wanting him to get involved. We were just leaving. But he wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on Veronica Ashford with an intensity I'd rarely seen from my quiet son. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to meet his gaze. "Ms. Ashford," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made several people lean in to hear better. "I believe you owe my mother an apology." Veronica laughed, actually laughed in his face. "Your mother? How touching. Let me guess, you're going to defend her honor? Stand up to the mean restaurant owner?" She looked him up and down dismissively. "Young man, I don't know who you think you are, but—" "I know exactly who I am," Trevor interrupted, his voice never rising but somehow filling the entire space. "The question is, do you know who I am?" "Should I?" Veronica asked with exaggerated boredom. "Are you some kind of social media influencer? A food blogger with a few thousand followers? Please, spare me the threats about bad Yelp reviews." Trevor pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Jennifer." "Yes, it's Trevor. I need you to send over the documentation for the Fifth Avenue property, the Golden Terrace specifically. Send it to my phone immediately." He paused, listening. "Yes, all of it. The lease agreement, the ownership documents, everything." Veronica's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "What exactly are you doing?" "I'm pulling up some paperwork you might find interesting," Trevor said, his phone already pinging with incoming documents. "You see, Ms. Ashford, you're right about one thing. This is your restaurant. You built it, you run it, you decide who eats here." He turned his phone around, showing her the screen. "But this isn't your building." The color drained from Veronica's face as she read whatever was on that screen. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for air. That's not. You can't be, she stammered. T. Winters, CEO of Cornerstone Holdings, Trevor said quietly. Your landlord. The person you write that very substantial rent check to every month. The person whose name is on your lease that comes up for renewal in… He glanced at his phone. 47 days. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on those marble floors. Every single person was frozen in place, watching this impossible reversal of power unfold. You're T. Winters? Veronica's voice had gone up an octave. But you're just you look like… Like what? Trevor asked calmly. Like someone who doesn't belong in your restaurant? Like someone whose mother couldn't possibly appreciate fine dining? Like the kind of person you can humiliate for sport while your wealthy guests watch? I saw several of those wealthy guests look away, suddenly very interested in their half-eaten meals. Trevor continued, his voice still deadly calm. Do you know what I find interesting, Ms. Ashford? In the 3 years you've been leasing this space, we've never had a single conversation. All our communications have gone through property managers and lawyers. You've never known who actually owns this building. And apparently that anonymity has allowed you to show your true character. Mr. Winters. Veronica started, her entire demeanor transformed. The Arctic Queen had melted into something desperate and frightened. I had no idea. If I had known she was your mother… Stop, Trevor commanded, and she did, instantly. That's exactly the point. You didn't know who she was, so you felt free to treat her like garbage. To humiliate her in front of a room full of people. To make her feel small and worthless because she doesn't wear designer clothes or drip with jewelry. He took a step closer to Veronica, who actually backed up against her own host stand. My mother is the kindest, most generous person I know. She worked night shifts for 30 years, taking care of people who society forgot about. She raised me alone after my father died, never complaining, never giving up. She's worth more than everyone in this room combined, including me. My eyes filled with tears. I'd never heard Trevor speak so passionately about anything. And you, he continued, his gaze never leaving Veronica's increasingly pale face. You decided she wasn't good enough for your restaurant because of her dress. A dress, by the way, that she bought with her own money that she earned through honest work. Not inherited wealth, not married money, but earned through dedication and sacrifice. I'm sorry, Veronica whispered, and for the first time she sounded genuinely human. I'm so sorry. You're not sorry, Trevor said simply. You're scared. There's a difference. You're scared because you just realized that your entire business exists at my discretion. This building, this location that you've built your reputation on, the address that brings in your high-end clientele, it's all mine. He turned to address the room at large. How many of you have watched her do this before? How many times has she humiliated someone for not meeting her standards? And how many of you sat there, silent, maybe even enjoying the show? The discomfort in the room was palpable. People who'd been recording earlier were now desperately avoiding eye contact. Trevor pulled up something else on his phone. According to my records, the Golden Terrace pays $45,000 a month in rent. That's a special rate, by the way. Significantly below market value for this location. A courtesy I extended because I believed in supporting ambitious entrepreneurs. He looked at Veronica. That courtesy ends today. Please, Veronica said, her voice breaking. Mr. Winters, please. I've invested everything in this restaurant. It's my life's work. And my mother invested everything in raising me, Trevor replied. Yet, you felt comfortable destroying her dignity in front of all these people. Tell me, Ms. Ashford, what do you think is fair? The woman who'd stood up earlier, Mrs. Pemberton, spoke again. If I may interject, Mr. Winters, I think what we've witnessed here today is more than just one incident. It's a pattern of behavior that many of us have chosen to ignore because the food was good and the ambiance was exclusive. She looked around the room. Perhaps we all need to reconsider what we value. Trevor nodded acknowledgement to her, then turned back to Veronica. You have 47 days left on your lease. I won't break that contract. Unlike you, I honor my commitments. But renewal is off the table. You'll need to find a new location. You're evicting me? Veronica gasped. I'm choosing not to renew your lease. Trevor corrected. That's my right as the property owner. Just like it was your right to humiliate my mother. Choices have consequences, Ms. Ashford. He turned to the room again. For those of you who recorded my mother's humiliation, I hope you'll have the decency to delete those videos. And maybe think about why you found entertainment in another person's pain. Several people immediately pulled out their phones, and I could see them deleting videos and photos. Trevor walked over to our table and gently took the check from my hands. He looked at it, then tore it in half. This meal is on the house, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Ms. Ashford won't be charging anyone for teaching her a valuable lesson about humanity. You can't, Veronica started. Actually, I can, Trevor interrupted. Unless you'd prefer we discuss the multiple health code violations I noticed walking through here. I may not be a restaurant expert, but I do know building codes, and that kitchen ventilation system isn't up to standard. Neither are the emergency exits that you've partially blocked with decorative plants. Veronica's mouth snapped shut. Trevor turned to my reading group, who were all staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Ladies, I apologize for the scene. If you'd like, there's a wonderful little Italian place around the corner. Family-owned, incredible food, and they treat every guest like family. My treat. Judith finally found her voice. Your son owns this building? I nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. He owns several buildings, actually. 17, Trevor said quietly. 18 as of last week. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. I saw people throughout the restaurant pulling out their phones again, but this time they were Googling Cornerstone Holdings and T. Winters. The expressions on their faces as they found article after article about my son's real estate empire would have been funny if the situation wasn't so surreal. Oh my God, someone whispered. He owns half the commercial district. Including the Meridian Tower, someone else added. That's $100 million property. Trevor ignored the whispers, focused entirely on me. Mom, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. No, ma'am, Maya said, standing straighter. I'm exactly where I need to be. That night, alone in Warhorse's cargo bay, Maya made a decision. She pulled out her grandmother's photo and studied it in the dim light. Catherine Daniels had faced her own battles against a system that didn't value what she brought to the fight, but she'd found a way to prove her worth when it mattered most. Now it was Maya's turn. She couldn't change what had happened today, but she could make sure it never happened again. She could be ready for the moment when politics failed and only competence mattered. She could prepare for the day when the spotlight faded and everyone would need her to light the way home. The investigation began quietly. Like all the best intelligence operations, Maya didn't storm into offices demanding answers, or file official complaints that would disappear into bureaucratic black holes. Instead, she did what she did best. She prepared methodically, gathering information with the same precision she used for pre-flight checklists. Her first ally was an unexpected one. Master Sergeant Rachel Dawson, the base's senior records specialist, had been watching the political maneuvering with growing disgust. A 25-year veteran who'd seen enough power games to fill a handbook, Dawson had access to files, regulations, and, most importantly, the kind of institutional memory that couldn't be found in official records. You want to know something interesting? Dawson said, sliding a folder across her desk during what appeared to be a routine administrative visit. I pulled the mission completion reports for the past 3 years. Guess which aircraft has the highest success rate for critical missions? Maya opened the folder and felt her breath catch. The numbers were stark. Warhorse had a 98% mission completion rate, compared to the fighter squadron average of 87%. More telling, when missions were categorized by difficulty, adverse weather, mountainous terrain, emergency response, her numbers went even higher. There's more, Dawson continued, glancing toward the door to ensure they weren't overheard. I cross-referenced these stats with media coverage reports. Interesting pattern emerges. The second sheet showed media mentions by aircraft type. Fighter operations were featured in 932 stories, interviews, and photo spreads over the past 18 months. Cargo operations, despite flying more missions in more dangerous conditions, appeared in exactly 17 mentions, all as background references. "Someone's been very careful about controlling the narrative," Dawson said quietly. That evening, Maya met with Melissa Rodriguez at a coffee shop off base. Melissa had been struggling with her own conscience since the Carson Ridge incident, and when Maya reached out, she agreed to talk. "I've been flying for 9 years, Melissa said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "I've seen good pilots get buried by politics, and I've seen mediocre ones get promoted because they looked good on camera. But what happened yesterday?" She shook her head. "That crossed a line." "I need to know something," Maya said. "Is this just about me, or is it bigger?" Melissa was quiet for a long moment. "Jack's got ambitions," she finally said. "Squadron commander, then wing commander, maybe stars someday, but his actual combat record is thin. Most of his missions have been high visibility, low-risk operations. Perfect for media coverage, not so perfect for actual combat experience. So he needs to control the narrative." "Exactly. Can't have cargo pilots showing up his tactical expertise. Can't have support crews getting credit for the dangerous missions." Melissa met her eyes. "Problem is, you're too good at your job to ignore completely. So instead of competing with me professionally, he's trying to eliminate you politically." Melissa finished. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Jason had been quietly networking with other junior officers, and he discovered something significant. The new restrictions on cargo operations weren't just affecting Warhorse. 3 other transport crews had been similarly marginalized, their expertise dismissed in favor of primary assets that often couldn't actually complete the required missions. "It's systematic," Jason reported during a crew meeting in Warhorse's cargo bay. "They're restructuring the entire support command to minimize cargo operations visibility, making us invisible." Leon, who'd been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "There's something else," he said. "I've been talking to some of the older crew chiefs. Though I do have one question. How did you know we'd be there today?" "I know you didn't just happen to be having lunch at the Golden Terrace." He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him all day. "Giuseppe told me. His nephew works in the kitchen there. When he heard you'd made a reservation, he called me. Said I might want to be nearby, just in case. He'd seen how Veronica treats people who don't fit her image." "So you've been sitting there the whole time?" "I was hoping I wouldn't need to intervene," he admitted. "I was hoping she'd just serve you lunch and leave you alone. But when she started in on you..." His hands clenched slightly. "Nobody talks to my mother that way. Nobody." That evening, after my friends had gone home still buzzing about the day's events, Trevor and I sat in my apartment sharing tea and comfortable silence. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the city hummed with its usual energy below us. "You know this changes things," I said eventually. "People know who you are now." "I know," he said simply. "But it was time. I've been hiding behind Cornerstone Holdings for too long. And honestly, seeing how people like Veronica operate when they think nobody important is watching, it's made me realize I need to be more visible, more accountable. If I own these buildings, I have a responsibility to know who I'm renting to, what kind of people they are." "That's very mature of you." "I learned from the best," he said, squeezing my hand. My phone buzzed with another notification. The local news had picked up the story. The headline read, "High-end restaurant owner's discrimination backfires when victim's son revealed as landlord. You're trending," I told Trevor with a mixture of pride and concern. "It'll die down in a few days," he said. "Something else will grab people's attention. But maybe, for those few days, people will think about how they treat others. Maybe someone will remember this story the next time they're tempted to judge someone by their appearance or perceived status." He was right about that. Over the next week, I received dozens of messages from people sharing their own stories of discrimination and humiliation at fancy establishments. Several other restaurant owners in Trevor's buildings reached out to him, promising to review their policies and training to ensure nothing like this ever happened in their establishments. Veronica Ashford issued a public apology that felt more like a legal document than genuine remorse. She announced that the Golden Terrace would be relocating to serve our clientele better, but industry insiders knew the truth. No premium location would touch her now. The last I heard, she'd opened a much smaller place in the suburbs, with signs prominently stating, "Everyone welcome," in the window. Mrs. Pemberton became a regular at Giuseppe's restaurant, where we now had lunch every Tuesday. She told me once that watching Trevor defend me had reminded her of her late son, who'd passed away years ago. "He would have stood up for me the same way," she said with tears in her eyes. "Your boy is special." But the most meaningful change came from Trevor himself. He started joining more community organizations, using his influence to support small businesses and charitable causes. He remained quiet and thoughtful, never seeking the spotlight, but no longer hiding from it either. "You know what the irony is?" he said to me one evening, about a month after the incident. "Veronica was so concerned about maintaining exclusivity, about keeping out the wrong people, but she never realized that the truly exclusive thing, the really rare quality, isn't wealth or fashion or the right address. It's kindness. It's treating every person with dignity. That's what's actually rare in this world." Looking back now, I realize that Tuesday afternoon at the Golden Terrace wasn't just about a cruel woman getting her comeuppance or a son defending his mother. It was about the masks we all wear, the assumptions we make, and the power dynamics we accept without question. It was about learning that the quiet person in the corner might be the most powerful one in the room, and that true strength doesn't announce itself with designer clothes or arrogant behavior. Every time I pass that building on Fifth Avenue now, I think about how things can change in an instant. How someone who seems powerless might have more influence than you could imagine. How kindness and cruelty have a way of coming full circle. The Golden Terrace's space has been empty for 3 weeks now, with a for lease sign in the window. Trevor's had dozens of offers from restaurateurs eager for that premium location, but he's taking his time, carefully vetting each applicant. "I want someone who understands that a restaurant isn't just about food," he told me. "It's about community. It's about making everyone feel welcome." Yesterday, he showed me an application from a young chef who wants to open a place that combines fine dining with a pay-it-forward program for those who can't afford it. "Every paying customer helps subsidize a meal for someone in need," Trevor explained, his eyes bright with interest. "She wants to break down barriers, not build them up." "Sounds like someone you should meet," I told him. "I already have." He smiled. "We're signing the lease tomorrow." And that's how the story of the Golden Terrace really ends. Not with revenge or destruction, but with transformation. The space that once embodied exclusion and cruelty will soon become a place of inclusion and generosity. The young chef doesn't know it yet, but Trevor's already planning to subsidize the rent for her first year, giving her the same chance he gave Veronica, but trusting that she'll use it to lift others up rather than tear them down. What would you have done in my situation that day? Would you have walked away quietly, or would you have stood your ground? And, more importantly, how many times have we all witnessed someone being mistreated and stayed silent because it wasn't our problem? The truth is, we all have more power than we think. Maybe we're not secret millionaires or property owners, but we have the power to speak up, to refuse to be silent witnesses to cruelty, to support those who are being targeted. Mrs. Pemberton proved that when she stood up in the restaurant. She had no financial power over Veronica, but she had something just as important: the courage to say, "This is wrong." If this story teaches anything, it's that you never really know who you're dealing with. The person you're mocking might have a son who owns your building. The woman you're dismissing might be a beloved mother who sacrificed everything for her family. The quiet figure in the corner might be taking notes, remembering everything, waiting for the right moment to act. But more than that, this story is about treating every person with respect, regardless of who they are or who might be watching. Because at the end of the day, how we treat others when we think we have power over them reveals who we really are. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a way of making sure we learn that lesson in the most public way possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.